I have a Persian father, and I grew up around Persian men. My grandfather was a huge cheater. He owned a store in Iran where the Shah actually was his customer. And my grandfather had a cot in the back of his store where he seduced young women. He even paid for them to go to college in England and other places. He was wealthy. My grandmother had to serve tea in bed to my grandfather and his concubines. My dad was a big cheater. I didn't know that until I was older because he always came home to us. But he even cheated on my mom on their wedding night. He went out by himself, and when he came home, he threw the ring at her feet and never wore it again. He was often gone for weeks at a time when I was little, so he wasn't home much. But he was a doctor climbing the career ladder, and he was a successful cancer researcher, actually. And he loved his children. He always loved us. But this is about cheating. I think that in certain cultures, men are raised that it's macho to cheat. My dad expected my brother to be a womanizer. He kept asking him if he'd been with women, like he was culturally encouraged to be a womanizer, whereas we were not allowed to date. My sister and I were not supposed to date. And the reason I'm making this video is because I had a comment. I made a video recently about, men on dating apps and what I thought of them. And I made a comment about the shirtless guy in the ocean holding a fish and something about, well, he's Middle Eastern, he's a cheater. And maybe that's not fair. But I think there's a grain of truth to it. I'm 60 now, and just having been around men, there's certain cultures that treat boys as little princess, like the Indian moms often do, Asian Indian. And there's certain cultures where men are taught that to be macho means to have many women. I think the black culture, for sure, maybe the Hispanic culture. I mean, people in all of all races cheat, but I'm thinking about men who pride themselves on being womanizers and who pursue being a womanizer at the expense of spending time with their families. And I don't like that, and I'm opposed to that. My dad cheated, and I vowed that I would never be a cheater and I would never marry a cheater because it was just my own personal value. And I never cheated on a guy. Actually, I cheated on a guy one time in my whole life, just that one time. And I'm glad that I did that. It was an important experience, but I don't believe in being a cheater. I don't date married men. I don't date men in relationships. And I do have that bias, not just that these Middle Eastern men cheat, but also that they don't value women properly, that they're emotionally closed off, that they have very rigid roles about women and freedom. Now, Tehran, my dad grew up in Tehran. He was born in the 30s, and Tehran, when he lived there, was a very modern city where women attended university. It was a bustling hub, like Paris is now, or New York. But after the Shah was taken out of power, um, Iran really changed and really regressed. So it's not the same it's not the same that it used to be. But yes, and I do have racial preferences around men. I've only ever dated white men. I've never dated a man of any other race other than white men. Not to say that I wouldn't. I try to be very open-minded. I think a lot of Japanese people are raised to be very cold. Chinese people are raised to value their studies and not exercise. Asian Indian men tend to be very flabby in their bodies. They don't work out. They have very rounded, their bodies are flabby. I work with men. I see their bodies, okay? So there are those things, and I have racial preferences. I think that all people are equally valuable, but I have certain preferences in terms of lifestyle, and so I tend to have certain biases against cultures that don't value fitness or value honesty or value freedom, and I have those preferences. And I'm not saying every Middle Easterner is a liar and a cheater and a womanizer. However, I think the culture tends to promote it, and I have that bias. And I would not date a Middle Eastern guy. I would date a black guy, I would date a Hispanic guy, I would date an Asian guy, although I never have. But a Middle Eastern guy, I would never. I'm pretty sure I would never. Um, and that is just my own preference, and that's something I'm not ready to change at all. I have a lot of resistance to that, and that's my right. You may leave your comments here and disagree with me, but if you're rude to me about that preference, I'm just going to block you, and you can leave my channel. That's my life experience, and I have a right to my preferences and to protect myself and to be around people who are honest and who are kind to me. And lying is not kind. I'd rather be single than be with some guy who's going to run around womanizing. But it's not just the womanizing, it's just how they think of women as, I can do whatever I want. But the woman can't cheat. They stone those women. I've never been to Iran and I don't want to go. So that's how I feel about Middle Eastern men.